Opening business, first we'll have the invocation by Community Service Director Von Sullivan, followed by the pledge by Councilman McClure. Stand, please.
Would you bow with me, please? Gracious Lord, we thank you so much for this evening and the occasion to be together and conduct the business of this great city. Father, I thank you for these men and women and their willingness to serve. I ask that your discernment and your wisdom be upon them tonight, and that they find peace in the decisions they have before them. Father, I just pray that their decisions would be for the good of the whole, and that personal agendas would be set aside. Father, we thank you so much for the dedicated men and women who serve this community in a professional capacity, their willingness to dedicate their lives to providing quality services for the citizens of Midwest City. Father, we thank you for the men and women who are all over the world tonight, guarding and guaranteeing our freedom, serving our country. Thank you for their dedication and their devotion. And Father, we thank you so much for the freedoms that we enjoy in this great country. Father, be with their families and with them and give them peace and comfort and protection while they're serving. Ultimately, Father, we thank you for the protection and the forgiveness and freedom from sin by the blood that was shed for us on that cross. And we give you glory and honor and thanks for that. We ask all of this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Next item is community-related announcements.
Daniel, do you have
No,
any?
sir.
Okay. Just have a couple that I'd like to share with you all. We continue on with our volunteer income tax assistance program located over at the community center. We provide that service Tuesdays and Thursdays through early April. Also want to mention that February 27th we'll have our daddy-daughter dance at the Reed Center. I'm told that the middle session is already sold out, so for any daddies, you better get on the stick. We also, in April, are going to have a chalk art event down at Charles J. Johnson Park in Town Center Plaza. Look for some information on that coming out soon. And also wanted to recognize Tim Lyon and Craig Davis for the work and energy that they've put in, which led to the city receiving a Clean Cities Award from ACOG for accomplishments in advancing and deploying alternative fuels and technology in the city of Midwest City. And lastly, want to mention that we did get our February sales tax check. I did get that out to the council and the administrative staff, but for the public, we actually saw a slight increase in sales tax, about 1.15%. However, we did see a decrease in use tax of $35,251. And so for the month, we were down $2,977. Given what's going on at the state and even within the metropolitan area, I feel pretty blessed that that we actually did see an increase in sales tax, even though we did see a decrease in use tax. For the year, compared to last year, we're up 1.2%, or about $271,000. However, we had projected to grow a little bit more with sales tax over last year, and so compared to projection, we're still trailing projection by about 1.23%, or $282,244.
Any other community-related announcements? Hearing none, the consent agenda. These items are placed on the consent agenda so that members of the City Council, by unanimous consent, can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any item proposed on the consent agenda does not meet with the approval of all council members or members of the audience wish to discuss a proposed item with the council, then it will be removed and heard in regular order.
Move to approve the
Second.
consent agenda?
Second.
Motion is second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries.
D1, discussion consideration of approving and passing an ordinance amending the Midwest City Code, Chapter 28 offenses miscellaneous by amending Article 2 offenses against morals, Section 28-20, disorderly house, and providing for repealer and severability. This item was tabled from the last council meeting. It sets up a process whereby if there are certain violations that occur at a residence over a rolling 90-day period of time, that the house can be considered a disorderly house, and the tenant or owner can be held responsible for that and be charged up to $750 and or 6 months in jail. 60 days in jail, I'm sorry.
6 months. I like
6
Really,
months.
yeah,
That would be
going big on it, man.
that would be severe. So this proposed ordinance has been brought forward by Councilman McClure, and I'd open the floor to any comments that he might like to make.
Yeah, Rick says he's gonna count my sentences, so I need to talk quickly. That didn't count at one, that was a preface. This has gone through some changes, some back and forth. I like where it's at in that we want to discourage our activities that our law enforcement professionals have to go to the same house repeatedly. The more that they have to go to problematic houses, the less that they can patrol our streets and help out with other activities that we actually want them to be doing. With that being said, the offenses are on the list. Only change to be made, of course, we discussed upstairs, removing larceny and adding a loud noise component to meet your question, Mr. Moore.
I think there's a couple people in the audience that had mentioned they would like to speak on this issue.
Okay.
I just saw that. Anybody?
Mr. Atkinson, go ahead.
And if you'd state your name and your address, please, sir.
Joe Atkinson. I live in New Walla. I have property in Midwest City on Southeast 15th Street. And I thank every one of you for serving. Daniel, I thank you for talking with me about this. And basically, what I would like to speak to, first I would like to ask you to not approve the ordinance as it's written. And my concern is that you have in 2820, I believe, the original ordinance on disorderly house. And then you have a paragraph that says, and essentially any other offense listed below committed on any property. Okay? Now, if I'm in control of property, then that's one thing. But if you own property and you have people that are coming onto your property, and let's say that you have one of the offenses is squatting, and unfortunately there are homeless people that sometimes you'll find them behind a trash dumpster. And what I'm concerned about is situations where in any time period that these numerous individual violations that were separate from disorderly house now become instances where I can be penalized. And one of the other instances is parking without permission on private property. You know, busted. That happens constantly. So I would just encourage you to consider the possibility that this can easily be abused by somebody that's just, they go in, if you don't know that these violations occur, if you own property that's more than a single piece of property. And again, I appreciate you all serving and considering and trying to accomplish a goal. And Daniel, I spoke about this to you at Rotary. If you would consider modifying it to where there wouldn't be so many additional automatic violations that go on this. And then finally, that it's the way it's adjudicated, that it doesn't become an issue where if you have these certain violations that you're not even aware that they're occurring, and if you have enough property that's contiguous, you could have 3 or 4, and you don't know because you're not looking at the way the book is carried as far as the police department goes. And those are things that I think administratively are difficult, and I appreciate the concept, but that's all the thoughts that I have on that.
On the notice requirement, every time a violation occurs, the property owner is going to receive a letter. And so you should, as a property owner, never be out in the dark, because you're going to get the letter every time. So well before you get to your 4th violation, you're going to have gotten the 1st letter, the 2nd letter, the 3rd letter. So hopefully that clears up your notice concern.
It really is, administratively, it's a nightmare. See, I cannot control what the public does.
And the section that you cited for that, I have it up right here. Which one did you say that?
Okay, I believe the main body of the ordinance was 2820. And then if you look at the separate violations that used to be in your existing ordinance, those are separate violations, not part of disorderly house. And if you take those items and you're taking away the individual responsibility for if a person commits a violation on my property, and it's not my intention to have that violation occur, and it's constant. You have people that, they violate the law on your property, and if you have public property, you can't really control that. So in the strictest type of enforcement, you would force property owners to be subject to violations and taking away the responsibility of the individual that's committing those violations.
Well, actually, the individuals committing the violations can also be held responsible. So, for example, public intoxication, the person who is actually publicly intoxicated may be arrested and taken to jail for a sobriety period and issued a citation. So there would still be some accountability on the part of the individual actually committing the crime at the address.
And on that same note, at what point am I, in a property owner, any property owner, responsible for somebody else committing, especially if you own a larger piece of property? How do you control people being, we certainly look for folks to not be violating any of these situations, but I just would encourage you all to consider the standpoint that you could be accruing these violations and have absolutely no control of it over what's going on, and the more people you have, the more violations you could have, and it's possible to have 3 in one day.
When you talk about big pieces of property, Kathy, when in the first part of the ordinance, it says it shall be a house. And so it wouldn't apply to other places. I want to make sure I'm thinking properly. Underneath A, it says house. So we're talking about houses here. There's nothing outside of houses listed. That's
Daniel,
my understanding.
On the bottom part of 2820, the new paragraph says and then it talks about any property.
So are you talking about in addition?
The second, I believe Mr. Atkinson is referring to the second sentence in subparagraph A. It shall also be unlawful for any person to lease or let any property for the purpose of keeping a disorderly house.
Actually, what I'm speaking to is the language that's in, at the bottom there where it says, disorderly house shall also include any property on which 3 or more nuisance violations have occurred within a floating line. So when you say any property, you just blew away house. And now
Well,
you're talking about any property.
when read together, it would be a house, but we can just switch that to any house.
Or residential property.
Yeah, we'll change it to residential.
Wait, if it's residential property, could it be an apartment complex?
Yes.
So would the owner of an apartment complex then suddenly be charged criminally if there was 3 or 4 drunken disorderlies in a common area over a certain period of time?
He would be charged for that if he did not take care of the issue. And I don't mind putting it as a residential house, because that's my objective, and we can steer clear of that bomb if you like.
But there's an awful lot of noise complaints and violations in common areas. I mean, in common areas, I'm not sure they should be exempt because if they are somebody's neighborhood.
I like where you're going with that. We can change it to personal residential property.
I just encourage you to consider when you look at this from a broader perspective, it could end up, could be real subjective and people could end up in trouble that we're planning on it.
Well, and I think where Joe's coming from, part of the things where he's worrying about are the very things, I know this sounds redundant, are the things that he worries about. You know, the last thing he wants is to have people parking on his places that don't live there. You know, I mean, in other words,
Sure.
we don't want to write him a citation because people are doing things that he does not want them to do to start with.
No. That's an easy fix. We change it to
Well,
residential.
then, the same thing goes, I mean, as y'all are talking, residential, you're saying a house, is that a residential tract of land? Is that, start talking the apartments, does that go along with the apartments? Or is that single family, is it you know?
What do you think it should be, Jeff?
multifamily? I'm sorry.
What do you think it should be?
Well, you can't discriminate against.
Well, I mean, I can see it
between apartment
to a
and
single-family
house.
home. If it was to an apartment complex, maybe
What about a trailer
if the
park?
same unit gets, not, if it has 100 units, if he gets 3 complaints across all 100, but the same unit has 3 complaints, and it couldn't be a common area in a residential neighborhood to where the developer, you know, I mean, to a single-family home or to a duplex, but I just think it needs cleaned up, or we need to look at it a little closer. And in the meeting earlier, y'all said that it is gonna be a work in progress. So, you know, we realize that, but I think we need at least a time where it is a work in progress. I would like to get some community business people and some realtors on board to where even if it's a work in progress, we're in time, we can tweak it.
I've told you, I've called those folks, Jeff, and that's
Oh, I
not a fair
believe you.
statement to say that. You know I've called those people.
Well,
Furthermore, this is the 3rd time this has been on the agenda, and it's very frustrating as a matter of public policy when you're trying to put something together, and it takes 3 meetings before I get any input from anyone on the horseshoe. That's very frustrating.
Well, and
They
I'm
should
just
have been
saying,
here for
even
the
if it was a
sign
work in
ordinance.
progress and we approved it, but I would just
Right.
like something where we can get some public input, why we're trying to tweak it,
we,
to help come up with some solutions where we can address it now and not later, or in the next 90 days and not after someone's in jail. Or,
Don't want to go to jail.
well, the 3 other guys went to jail too. That ought to make you feel a little better.
Thank you
Well,
very much for.
I
Thank
do
you,
agree
Mr.
with
Atkinson.
Jeff. I think we probably need to revisit and look at it before we start approving it, because we having several people with questions in reference to this ordinance that we're trying to pass.
Do you think that your concerns came about yet about 25 seconds ago, or the 3 other times it was on the
No.
agenda, might you have had a concern?
No, I had a concern, and.
You had a concern then, but you didn't
Yes,
voice it. Do you know
and
how
I-
frustrating that is?
Was the what now?
Do you know how frustrating it is if you had that concern, it took you
I
3
know,
meetings to say it?
But I don't look at it as being frustrated, because
I
this-
do.
we should not take this personal, because.
I don't take
this
it
is
personal at all. I
something-
think it's very
this
serious
is
for
something
residents
has to do
who have
with
these
Midwest
problems.
City, for all the residents, not just how we feel. It's for everyone in Midwest City. This is not about how we feel, it's what's best for Midwest
Shannon.
City, and everyone should have a voice if they see fit to voice their opinion about this.
I'd love
as
for you to
well as
voice your
Jeff,
opinion.
As well as these business owners.
Mr. Landsberger, and sir, if you'd state your name and your address for the record, please.
Shannon Landsberger, 1949 Ruling Drive. In listening to what we're talking about here, I do understand this gentleman's point about larger residential groups. So my perspective here is, as a homeowner on an individual dwelling, that's what I'm going to call it, I'm someone who is affected or would be affected by this policy in what I think is a positive way. I've had neighbors or I still have neighbors who in the last, I think it was 2015, I've had 7 calls in. They've been arrested for DUI. They've had several noise violations. They've been fighting in public, issues like that. And I would love to have a way for the city to do something about that house. Now, that particular residence is a rental property. It is not owned by the people that live there, so the person renting to them has no interest in doing anything as long as they keep paying their rent. He doesn't really care what they do there, because it doesn't affect his financial financials coming in. I think that including the owner in this is a good thing, to make sure that you have someone who, if they're investing money and they're investing their time and resources in this property, they're going to want to pick someone who is going to represent them well and try to take care of our neighborhoods. Because if they're owning property here and renting here, but they don't want to live here, that's not a good situation to be in.
Sir,
think
let me
that,
ask you a question. This house in your neighborhood, if a fight broke out and that fight ended up in your front yard when the police showed up,
It's actually happened.
then the arrest would be your address.
The way that this is written? it
Yes.
would?
So you would
It
have
wouldn't be the
your first strike.
originating Party?
It's not where the crime begins, it's where the arrest occurs.
Okay.
Now,
Now,
that would
given-
count as a strike against you.
Right, but given my knowledge of my actions, that would be the only one that I would have any,
That's not,
awareness of it,
that's
that's
not fair. The violation would occur where the fight was, which was next door. It doesn't matter, they show up in his front
So
yard.
somebody's drunk
he's
and
calling
they
on his
stagger
neighbor.
into your yard and they pass out on your yard, you're gonna actually figure out where they got drunk and charge them with public drunk for
No.
where they got
You're not
drunk?
you're not gonna get a violation for some random guy showing up in your front yard.
One of the things that he cited was a DUI.
You've given tickets as city prosecutor for
No.
someone having found
But
in
it's
a
just
drunk
incorrect.
person in their front yard.
Yes.
You did that as city
Yes.
prosecutor.
Yes,
We
we
should've
actually went
canned
to-
you, man.
We actually went to the Supreme Court on one, so.
okay, all of the incidents that have occurred that have ended up somewhere near my property, I'm aware of where they originated from. And it's been pretty easy to point out because we know the house that is the issue, we know the people that live there and the people that they keep as company. We know where the problem is. And the police, I believe, are doing everything that they are able to do to, create to give them a fine or whatever situation it is that needs to happen there. But it's not enough to change their attitude or their ability because apparently they're able to pay the fine or get out or whatever the situation may be. And then they just keep going about business as usual and continuing to be a nuisance. So I'm supporting this because I think it would be a positive thing. I think that there may be little things that you need to adjust, which, any new ordinance, I can see that being, something that would be a good thing, but I'm still supporting it, so. Any questions before I?
Danielle, I do have one other thing.
Thank you, Shannon.
I do support it. I think it's very good. I got some concerns, and it just needs looked at. I mean, and I don't know if we could approve it, and as long as we can bring these committees on, but even as a landlord, and Rick, you're an attorney, I mean, you may have a hard time legally evicting someone. I mean, if we know ahead of time, you could put in the lease, if you're, arrested, you have these 3 complaints, then you're in violation of your lease, but think further out. If these landlords don't have that in place, then they're being penalized, and legally, they can't even evict their tenant. So I just think there's things that we need to look at.
You're right, as a responsible landowner, you should have that in your contract. I bet you'll only make that mistake once. But the part that's important is it's going to go to municipal court, and when you go there, and if you're trying to be a positive solution, and you talked with the judge, we can handle that there.
How? You're saying that somebody who might have unruly kids or neighbors, or if you own a trailer park and you're doing every single thing that you can do, the judge can say, well, you're trying, therefore you're not guilty?
No, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can give a suspended sentence or work out some sort of a
So you're
process,
saying that
Rick.
in a criminal prosecution, somebody ought to have some sort of mitigation on guilt or innocence or penalty if they really try?
Did I say that? Did I say if they really try? As a municipal
They
prosecutor,
really try?
you know that you've worked with people over there, right at the court across the street. You know you've done that. Now you're acting like you haven't. That's not very
No,
ingenuous.
but that's not the point. The point is.
So you didn't do that? Are you
No,
saying I've
no,
never
what
done
I'm
that as city
saying is
prosecutor?
It's very simple to hold somebody accountable for DUI. They can't drive a car when their blood alcohol limit is above this, or if they refuse. It's objective. You have to take into account criminal intent, criminal mind, criminal action, and this is so vague, and you can't hold somebody responsible if I'm drunk and I stagger down a street and I fall on your lawn and I pass out there and that's where I'm arrested. I think it'd be kind of fun to find 3 or 4 people willing to pay that fine to do it in your yard, just to see how it would get handled if you got prosecuted.
That's not going to be a violation, Rick.
How would it not be?
You're not, there's someone else here, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm
Name
all
and
ears.
address.
I'll be here all night, man, go ahead.
I think I understand what you're trying to do.
Name and
I-
address, please.
This is Bob Tony. I live at 116 West Ridgewood Drive here in Midwest City.
Thank you, Mr. Tony.
You're welcome. I think I understand what you're trying to do. I admire what you're trying to do. I couldn't agree with you more on the fact that we want to have police officers doing what we want them to do and not going on some of these frequent calls all the time. And so I appreciate that, but, you know, also as a landlord myself, having some rentals here in Midwest City, you have to think about the term personal responsibility. And I don't have the police coming to my house because I'm causing problems. That's because I have taken personal responsibility for my actions to conduct myself a certain way. And when I have tenants, I try to put good people in those homes. I can't be held responsible if a tenant becomes a raging alcoholic during the time they live there and they have 3, police visits because they were of public drunkenness. There's nothing I can do about that. Even if I wanted to legally, by putting a clause in my lease agreement, it still takes time to go through that process, okay? And so I don't know the whole agenda of this thing. I know you don't mean for it to be, but is to have personal responsibility on the landlord for what their tenants do.
No, that's not my intention. My intention is if the city tells you, hey, your tenant is a meth dealer, and then you turn around and sign a contract with them, that's very frustrating to me, that I have to live next door to your meth house.
And
That's my intention.
But that's right. But the end result is that the landlord is responsible for what their tenant has done. And that's just not right, because personal responsibility in Midwest City and personal responsibility throughout this country is very important. That's what we've got to get back to.
So if my
And so
goal
I
is,
think, I understand what you're trying to do. I'm wondering if maybe a word changed in that would help. Because you've already now narrowed this down to where it's going to be residential, correct? And what's the possibility of, instead of saying owner of the property, what about occupant of the residence? I'm just wondering if that is a
I could
possibility.
have done it that way, and I did not choose to do it that way. I intentionally went the landowner because I want the slumlords not to rent their house to meth dealers. That's
Right.
why I'm doing that.
But I can tell you, first of all, I would take offense to that because I'm not a slumlord.
I never accuse you of being a
I know,
slumlord.
but
I think
that
people who are
term-
slumlords rent their houses to meth
That's
dealers.
right.
Have you ever rented your house to a meth dealer?
Absolutely.
If I told you there was a meth dealer in your house, would you re-rent it to him?
Absolutely
You're not a slumlord. You're off the list.
Right, but you also cannot use the term for a landlord as a slumlord, because sometimes you don't know what you get, okay? I mean, there have been times where I've rented a house out and regretted that I rented it out to that person, but there's nothing you can do about it at that point, okay?
Not
I mean,
until
you can
that
try to
12-month
go.
lease expires.
You can
No,
try
you
to
should
go
put a
through
provision in your contract that says if you violate such and such, you get kicked out. That's basic. You gotta do that.
Well, you know what? You just don't simply snap your fingers and kick somebody out.
Correct.
There is a process that you have to go through, and they have legal rights. And so again, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I understand what you're trying to do. I even agree with the concept of it. I appreciate you thinking about it. I think it's well thought out. There's just a couple minor details. I think if we change the words, it might fit a little bit better. But you can't, you can't hold somebody responsible for someone else's actions. Personal accountability, personal responsibility needs to mean something.
Do you
That's-
hold a wife responsible for criminal activity of a husband in a house they hold in joint tenancy?
Are you asking?
No.
What was your question again?
I'm done.
Do you
Thank
hold
for your
a
time.
wife?
Thank you.
Bob, I wasn't interrupting you, was I? I'm sorry, it wasn't my intent. I was.
No, sir, you're fine. I thought you were asking me
It
a
was more of
question.
a dialogue. I didn't mean to interrupt you if I
Oh,
was.
you didn't, you're
Okay.
fine.
Do you hold a wife responsible criminally for the criminal behavior of her spouse if the house is owned in joint tenancy?
Should I hold her responsible for
Criminally?
the criminal conduct of her
No,
spouse?
no. Do you give her a criminal violation if there are a number of calls for service at the house that are caused by her spouse, just because she owns the house in joint tenancy?
While I'm sorry that would impact her, my concerns are much more placed with the neighbors who have to deal with the situation that her husband's causing than their house.
All right, so scenario, husband beats wife, gets charged with domestic violence, and it happens repeatedly, we prosecute her because her husband beats her.
That's well outside the confines of the
No,
law, Rick. There's nothing.
not outside
It
the
is.
confines.
There's, the provisions are specifically listed, and domestic violence is not on there.
Okay?
And there specifically was not listed on there, because we would never want to encourage someone not to call the police for domestic violence. That's why it's not on there. And if you read the ones that are on there, they're very clear why they're on there. I'd like to make a motion to approve amending the item, changing B2 from disorderly house shall also include any property to any residential property, striking the larceny section and adding section 26-3 prohibiting generally noise. A second on that one, huh?
Daniel, again, I really would like you to push this thing through, but there's so many issues. I mean, I've rented houses to people, and a guy did have running a meth lab. He was the best tenant I ever had. And he would, yes, sir, no, sir. And he had more stuff going on in that house than you would imagine, and they literally busted him. And fortunately, it was one time. But, I mean, then in your lease, you put in there that if you're caught drinking, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I would like to put it in there, and we do. Every time you have a problem, you try to add that to the contract. But there's some things in this that I don't even know legally if you could tell a guy, but it just needs some, I think it needs some work. And
I'd like to withdraw my motion, and I'd like to voice my discontent with the people in the Horseshoe that I've brought this 3 times and not one of you have called me. I'm very unhappy with that. I'd like to make a motion to table.
I'd second motion, we go ahead and table it, and that it gets some work on, get tweeted, and then, because I think it's a great concept. It's just some things I disapprove, as long as what they have already expressed, so.
And Daniel, it's don't take it personal, because one guy, we hadn't had time to really talk about it a lot, and as one person brings up a question, and it happens a lot.
I think I brought it up 3 or 4 months ago, how much time you need.
We don't hear these other problems, and you hear one guy mention, well, what if this happens, and then that brings on another question, so.
And that is totally fair, while at the same time, I get phone calls that say, hey, I'm really tired of the guy next door, and the fighting, and people drinking, and throwing beer bottles, and dealing drugs. This is a very big priority if you live next door to that person, but motion's been made to table, and press the motion.
I agree.
Mr. McClure, you would like to table this to the next council meeting or another council meeting? The next one?
Next council meeting,
To the 23rd?
correct.
Thank you.
You think maybe we should go into the 9th? to the
Whatever
8th?
you think would be
From the
appropriate,
8th
that's
of
what I would
March?
like to
I
do.
mean, I just don't want us to rush it, because I don't want it to come back through.
I'm not the one with questions. You tell me how long you think. I'm really asking you.
Well, I think I'm just trying to be logic, where everybody have all these questions. So, do you think you're gonna be able to answer all the questions by the 23rd?
Well, do you
I'm
think,
asking you, what do you think would be appropriate? Would it be a month or 3 or?
I just think to be logical, it would be somewhere in March, either March the 8th, and you can get with all these different questions. that
March the
people
8th would be
have.
grand, fantastic. I withdraw the motion to table and make a motion to table to March. You say 8th?
8th is fine.
8th, or let's go the second one in March.
22nd?
The second one in March, and my phone number is listed. Please call me if you have
That is-
questions.
Okay, the 22nd?
Yes.
How are we gonna address trying to get some of these questions and concerns to where we can address them before the,
do you think we maybe should have a committee that looks at this?
Whatever you guys would like to do, because I was only one vote on that one, so I want it to pass.
I mean, personally, I do. I think we need, someone with some legal experience, some landlords, some concerned citizens, and that way you're not getting blindsided, because there's a whole nother wave of questions if there's another half dozen people that come in and throw some other things out.
I mean, I hate to form a committee on this thing, but I think when we come back the second meeting in March, we're gonna be sitting right here in the same spot with the same questions. I don't think anything's gonna change between now and then, unless we have somebody look at it and study it and get a consensus of the group, the people that are involved.
How about we just take no action, because we can't approve a committee at this point, can I, Kathy?
No, sir, it's not on.
So let's just take no action. I withdraw my motion to table. We'll take no action and we'll figure something else out.
Then maybe we can look at forming a committee and including some of the people that Councilman Moore talked about, maybe some realtors or some property owners.
I'd love that, and if they would call me back, I'd even have them on a committee.
Okay,
I'll help you with that.
I'd love that.
You
so
all
we'll
wanna do
we'll
it
discuss
on
that at the next meeting when it's
22nd
on the
of March?
agenda.
Don't wanna do 22nd, is that enough time?
Okay, so we had a motion.
No, take no action.
Take no action, okay.
Next item is discussion consideration of awarding the bid to and entering into a contract with Holland Backhoe, Inc. in the amount of $387,570 for the Carl Albert Titan Tower Modification Project. Staff is requesting this item be continued for 2 weeks.
Move to continue. Second.
Have a motion and a second to continue. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item is discussion consideration of change order number 1 to the contract with Garver Engineering entered into on February 10th, 2015, increasing the original contract amount by $626,260, making the contract total $56,760 for the Carl Albert Titan Tower Modification Project. Staff would also request this item be continued for 2 weeks.
Second.
Motion and a second to continue. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. New business or public discussion for the Midwest City Municipal Council. New business or public discussion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Call to order the Midwest City Municipal Authority. Consent agenda. These items are placed on the consent agenda so that trustees of the Midwest City Municipal Authority, by unanimous consent, can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any item proposed on the consent agenda does not meet with approval of all of the trustees or members of the audience wish to discuss proposed item with the trustees, that item will be removed and heard in regular order.
Move to approve.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? That motion carries. New business or public discussion, I lost my place, for the Midwest City Municipal Authority.
Move to
New-
adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Call to order the Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority. Discussion item, discussion and consideration of approving the minutes of the staff briefing and regular meeting January 26, 2016 as submitted.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Second discussion item is discussion consideration of following the Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority Trust Board of Grantors recommendation for approval and authorizing distribution of the following grant awards totaling $425,000 for the 2015-2016 fiscal year. $1,175.94 to the Midwest City Police for K-9 protective cooling vest, and $146,101.90 for a training simulator. $27,500 to the Midwest City Economic Development for Heritage Park Mall feasibility study. $7,000 to Middale Schools Foundation for Subscribe to Ready to Learn / First Book. $62,500 to Midwest City Community Development for Innovation District Plan. $38,000 to the Midwest City Tree Board for Park Lawn Beautification, and $28,300 for Hudeberg Drive Island Irrigation Project. $100,000 to the Midwest City Fire Department for Equipment Wish List. $8,495 to Rose State College for amphitheater modernization. $4,000 to Middale Food Pantry, Inc. for dry storage building, and $1,927.16 to the Midwest City Parks and Recreation for Festival Inflatable Project. The Board of Grantors met on January 21st and made those recommendations. The city did receive grant applications totaling over $1 million, over $1.1 million, and you've got various pieces of attached information to you. Staff and the Board of Grantors recommend approval.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item D2. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? That motion carries.
Next item is discussion consideration of action to reallocate assets, change fund managers, or make changes in the statement of investment policy guidelines and objectives. No action is necessary on this item.
Want to do new business, public discussion before we do executive session? Sure. We'll move next to new business and public discussion for the Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority. Is there any new business or public discussion for the Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority? Next item is the addendum to the agenda of the Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority, executive session, discussion and consideration of one, entering into an executive session as allowed under 25 OS 307B4 to discuss Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority versus Health Management Associates Incorporated and the Oklahoma County District Court case number CJ 2014667, and 2, an open session authorizing the general manager/administrator to take action as appropriate based on the discussion in the executive session.
Move.
Have a motion and a second to go to executive session. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. We'll be in executive session.